Okay. All right. Now, with this many tables and this many people, naturally we are not going to be able to answer all the questions. Thank you. And I went back to the question table and said, give me 3 right now just to get started. And of course, the people at the question table are trying to combine similar questions. I've asked the panelists to limit their answers to 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll see where we go from there. But we only have about an hour for this, and so I don't want any single question to take the entire time. So I'm going to start with a question on economy. And it's a combination of questions coming from tables 9, 10, and 12. And I'm guessing from the question that you can guess who should be the first person to answer it. But is Singapore a good economic model for Okinawa, even though it's independent? That is the role of bases or what is the role of bases in a Singapore version of Okinawa? So I imagine that, Colonel Newsham, that's directed at you to begin with. Yoroshiku.
Okay, well, thank you. The answer is that, as I tried to explain, that if Okinawa were to try and adopt some sort of a Singapore model, that the bases would remain a pillar, one part of the this 4 or 5 prong structure that you have. And as I said, it's a piece that, as we've seen in Hawaii, we've seen it in Southern California, we've seen it in the Tokyo region in Japan, we've seen it up in Aomori Prefecture. It is a piece of the puzzle. And one of the things that it really offers as a benefit is the relative stability in income. That even when the economy goes down, you tend to get about the same. When it goes up, you get about the same. And it's a constant flow. And that's why I would see it as a piece of the puzzle. And naturally, as you've seen, everywhere bases exist, probably everywhere they've ever existed, they do tend to move around. There'll sometimes be reasons to shrink them. Sometimes you'll expand it somewhere else. And that's a different part of the game, is that it has to be, you try to get the right configuration. But it is something that does serve as an essential part of a diversified economy, rather than one which relies on a single industry. And single industry economies tend to do really well when the market's really good. And then when it's not, they suffer very, very badly.
Let me just ask what Mr. Iju thinks of the Singapore model. The Singapore model.
わかりました。日本語でちょっと答えさせていただきます。後で英訳をしていただきますので、シンガポールの発展というのは非常に、私も素晴らしいことだとは思います。ただ沖縄とかなり状況が違うのは、沖縄は重要な場所を基地に取られている。県土の、沖縄本島だったら、中南部の非常に経済発展に重要な場所が取られているという問題がある。だからそこを解決しなければ、シンガポールのような、経済発展というのを望むのはなかなか厳しいものがあるだろうというふうに考えています。で、ただ沖縄のポテンシャルは高いので、経済発展は十分に可能なエリアであります。だからそれに、発展に向けて基地問題の解決も並行して進めていく必要があるというふうに私は考えています。
Okay, very briefly, Mr. Iju says that he thinks the Singapore model is very good, and there may be points at which it can be applied to Okinawa. However, in Okinawa's situation, the major regions of Okinawa are currently occupied by the military, and if even a portion of those which have the potential to benefit Okinawa economically were released, then perhaps it could work. And there are great future potentials.
Let's all thank Liz Teruya for helping out with. She didn't know that she was going to get stuck doing that. My next question comes from Table 8, and it is initially directed at Mr. Yara, Mr. Kotani, and Colonel Nushin. And it has to do with education, but from both sides, both perspectives. How do we educate U.S., in particular Marines, soldiers, and Congress, about why the military are in Okinawa? By the same token, how do we educate Okinawans about national security issues in Japan? So who wants to go first? So how do we go about educating both sides in this issue? How do we educate Marines, soldiers, and Congress, as Governor Abercrombie mentioned today? And also, how do we educate Okinawans about what Mr. Kotani talked about earlier, the role of Okinawa in national security, or in international security? どうぞ。ヤラさん。いいですか？難しいでしょ。Good.
Well, just like Governor said, the knowledge about the Okinawa-based issue is not so much well known. Although the issue of Okinawa is spoken so widely and so oftenly, but most of the people in Japan doesn't know what is the function of marine in Okinawa. That's taken up 75% of the base total area in Okinawa. Well, even a simple fact that Okinawa is not the original host of U.S. Marine. It was Gifu Prefecture and Shizuoka Prefecture up until middle of 1950s. It was a marine hub relocated from mainland to Okinawa in the middle of 50s, mainly because of the herd protest in mainland Japan. And also, as I have mentioned in my presentation, it is mainly Japanese government who may decide where to host the military forces, because U.S. are sending nation, Japan is hosting nation. U.S. cannot, say we cannot stay other place than Okinawa. So you have to surrender Okinawa as our basis. That's, if they can do that, that is the military imperialism and military occupation of Japan by United States. So it is the base issue is mainly solved by Japanese government as a host. So we have to recognize that fact first. We have to build up that basic understanding first, I guess.
So you have to educate the Japanese government would be what your addition to that question. Kotani-san, did you want to answer?
Yeah. Well, I think how we can educate the Japanese government, Japanese general public about the importance of U.S. Marines in Okinawa is, the first step should be to clear the misunderstanding about the U.S. Marines. Because Japan doesn't have a Marine, many people don't understand what Marines are used for. And a couple of years ago, I identified 13 primary missions for U.S. Marines, and to my surprise, we think U.S. Marines' primary role is the amphibious operations, but out of 13 operations, only 2 are amphibious assaults operations. Others include humanitarian disaster relief and partner capacity building and supporting the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy. So I think first step should be to understand the missions for the U.S. Marines. And in Japan now we are discussing about the necessity of the position of Japanese version of a Marine. And some people are now seriously discussing, what kind of organization is necessary. And I hope during the discussion about the Japanese version of Marine, hopefully we can deepen our understanding about the U.S. Marines too.
Answering the specific question of how one educates on this topic, and since this is kind of an academic forum at U of H, without being too glib, the answer would be do your homework. I'm not being funny, but the point is that there's a lot of existing information which is readily available. One approach, an easy approach, is to type my name into Google with U.S. Naval Institute proceedings, Japan Times. Even if you'd like to read it in Japanese, if you can find the Sentaku magazine articles from 2002, I think it was August and September, a very lengthy two-part thing on why Marines are in Japan, why they're in Asia. You could also type in General Gregson's name, and you will find articles to this effect as well. Additionally, the Marines on Okinawa put out a number of bilingual materials which are readily available. They have a bilingual magazine which actually explains and highlights what is going on. Additionally, the Japanese Ministry of Defense has put out some of the best explanations, both written and graphic, of the importance of U.S. forces in general and the Marines in specifically, which is really some of the best it's some of the best I have ever seen. And of course, there's one aspect of all of this is that the part of the allow citizens to make their own decisions. And that's always an essential part of this process. And to the extent that the media presents all sides of an issue, presents it fairly, and assumes that its readers are intelligent enough to understand and make their own decisions, that's a very important piece of the puzzle as well. But as I say, if you go on the internet, you can, in pretty short order, come up with some very, very good, detailed explanations for why Marines are on Okinawa and for all sides of the debate as well. So, thank you.
General Gregson also wanted to discuss this.
In addition to those comments, I would add that it would be worthwhile for the United States and Japan to work out a publicly discussable strategy of the defense of Japan involving both self-defense forces and U.S. forces to make clear to both of our publics what the circumstances are, why we're deployed forward, not just Marines, but Army, Air Force, Navy also, and how we would operate in an alliance to defend Japan, and beyond just Japan, how we would operate as an alliance to help assure peace and stability and security in the greater region.
Thank you. The next question comes from tables 10, 11, and 15, where it's adapted from those.
Dumped against the Japanese maritime, what is that? Coast Guard ship. It is, what can I say? Somehow, yes, we're worried about the Chinese military expansion and that kind of a challenge to the peace and stability. But we are, in terms of the space issue, it is the distribution of the burden is something not to do with this Chinese or international political situation. That's what we think, and I'm sorry, I personally think. So we simply we should simply think about or talk about the security of Japan and stability of East Asia, not connected with base issues, because base issues, I repeatedly say that this is the domestic issue. After U.S. Expressed tell Japanese government the need of deploying forces, it should be the Japanese government to, distribute the forces and the bases. So I think we have to be careful with mixing up this international situation and the base issues.
Mr. Iju.
Yes. 尖閣問題に関してはですね、それをめぐって、尖閣諸島をめぐって、日中両国が対立するという、そういう状態は、両方の、日本、中国の国益にとって大きなマイナスだというふうに考えます。
Okay, this is going to be a very broad answer, understanding that this is coming from someone who, represents the government. But he says that the Senkaku issue is a very important and big issue at the moment, and it may potentially have a very big negative effect on the Japan-China relationship, and that's all.
これは沖縄及びアジア太平洋地域の安定、それと発展にとっても大きなマイナスになるというふうに考えています。特に沖縄にとってかなり大きな影響が出ていて、順調に伸びていた観光客、中国からの観光客が、この尖閣問題、圧力が生じた以降、マイナス、7割のマイナスになるというふうなそういう状況も出てきています。
Mr. Yu says that it will have a huge effect and influence on the development of the Asia-Pacific region. In connection and related to that, it would have an effect upon the large influx of Chinese tourists into Okinawa at this time. He says they'll probably have more than a 70% effect.
日中関係は冷静な態度で、両国の日本と中国の将来を展望した上で解決を図っていくことが重要だと思っています。で、沖縄に尖閣諸島はあるわけですけれども、中国と日中関係がエスカレートしていって、新しい火種が沖縄に発生することになると、現在の沖縄の重たい基地負担にさらに負担が加わることになって、沖縄にとって極めて憂慮すべき事態になると思っています。
Okay, serious considerations need to be addressed and taken into account regarding any future developments of the Japan-China relationship, and he says that there is a potential that it will become an ever bigger burden than what is already in existence.
I was going to ask you, Takara Sensei.
Well, the question always, the answer is one-sided by protecting by army or military. So why the Senkaku issue happened? Always put the issue to military side to solve the problem. But why other side? Because Okinawa did that in history. Okinawa sent a mission to the China and stopped something to Japan and China at that time and said not to do this. So they negotiate that, and then finally China accepted that. So like Okinawa is not only a prefecture of 4701 because Okinawa has the prefecture office.
small office branch in Beijing. Also have some offices in Fukkensho, the Fukushu city near Okinawa, where the Xi Jinping are the Chinese top boss. So maybe it's better for Okinawan to have some role to make up some bridges to Japan and China and other places. That's the Okinawan other geopolitical role, I think.
Okay. Next question has to do with the environment and comes from table number 2 and is initially addressed to Mr. Iju, Professor Takara, and Mr. Kotani. Poor Iju-san is getting a hard workout today. Military bases often leave behind toxic waste pollution when they close. These wastes can cause health problems. How important is this issue to the people of Okinawa and the prefectural government? Also, how important is it to the national government?
環境問題についてということですが、確かに基地の中でどのような運用がなされているのかというのは明らかでないので、どのような物質がどうあるかというのがわからない状況です。で、これまでに返された基地についても、クリーンナップに相当程度の時間がかかっています。で、これは、返してもらった土地を後利用する上でも極めて、大きな課題になってきます。それで、昨年度に、法改正をして、後利用に取り掛かるまでのこの現状回復、環境の、回復、の期間をですね、長くするという、そういう形で、対応はしています。ただ、それでもやはり短いのではないかと。返還までにも時間がかかりますが、返還されて後利用にかかる時間も相当な時間がかかるということです。
Okay, at this time, the Okinawa government is not fully aware and doesn't know all of the chemical and waste products that currently are in existence at the military bases, whether that's all of the bases, whether that's some of the bases, what percentage they do not know and are not aware of it at this time. It is, however, they do realize that cleaning and addressing this issue will take a lot of time, money, energy, labor, etc. They realize that it is going to be a very, very huge task. Even after following the relocation of the bases, even be it a small percentage, they have been seriously considering it. It has been on the table from a couple of years ago, and they realize that even after the relocation, this is a project that will extend for many years forward, also based upon the extent.
Mr. Kotani and Professor Takara were also invited to answer this.
Thank you. I should be very brief. Of course, the environmental issue is very important, and this is why now the Japanese and American governments are now talking about the so-called Green Alliance, making the alliance more environmental friendly. So this is important not only for the facilities to be returned, but this is also important for the existing bases. So I think both Japanese and American governments and the industries should cooperate more to introduce the environmental friendly technologies and technologies and knowledges.
My answer is that one is related to the so far status of forces of the U.S. military people. So in that, there's no responsibility to get the land to pure as before. So they just return that. There is no duty to recover that land. That is one thing. And another thing is that they don't have to give the information about something toxic that is not legally required. So they just put that. So we didn't know that before diversion, also after diversion. Even we find there is something polluted here, there within the fence. They can say, allowed to access that. Do not give information to the prefecture even, they ask. So that's the so far, that's agreement between Japan and the United States. But at that time, when the agreement made, Okinawa was not Japan. Not before that with diversion. So Japan and the United States agreed before Okinawa get into the Japan, so it's a complicated relation between among these, and also the environmental problem is resolved by the environmental basic law of Japan. But this is a new law about 10 years ago or 20 years ago. But before that, some little about air pollution or something like that. That's pollution basic law. When they changed that, United States military especially interested in that changing the law. So they are afraid that the Japanese environmental law apply to U.S. military bases. But Japanese legislature didn't make that point, just to say maybe an exception or something. But the United States military is very interested in that. Why they didn't apply that to that? Because the new law and protect the environment. So the environment is not guarded by a fence; it's coming out. So maybe it's better to have some inspection or check something happening in the place. So what is happening, or that they have to explain that what is the cause of this, I think.
Did Mr. Ichi have anything more you wanted to say? Because he was nodding very vigorously.
Okay. Next question. It's a combination of questions coming from tables 6, 8, and 11. Initially to Professor Takada and Mr. Yara. Discourse on Okinawa tends to be dominated by non-Okinawans, Japanese, US, and China. What is Okinawa's voice in the issue or on the issue? At what point does security concerns of other countries override the rights of Okinawans? Good question.
Well, I'm not sure why this kind of discourse is spreading around, but it's about let me point out only one thing. The governor of Okinawa won Futenma out of Okinawa, and prefectural assembly so many times filed a resolution to request Futenma out of Okinawa. And 41 city, town, mayor get together, went up to Tokyo, met Prime Minister Abe to request stop deployment of Osprey and Futenma out of Okinawa, joined by all the chairmen of city, mayor, town, assembly, council. So I don't know why this kind of discourse, is spreading around. Thank you.
Takada Sensei was nodding vigorously.
Okay, I would like to say just one episode around maybe it's a 16th century or so. But the Mongolian Manchu, the game is famous for Japan. And twice they attacked Japan. At that time, Japan tried to fight, but very happily, it's a coincidence. The typhoon came in twice, and they couldn't invade Japan. But actually, they also came to Okinawa to conquer twice. But the Okinawan people send the water to them. But they are very exhausted, long voyage, so they need water. So Okinawan people can approach to them by boat and giving them food and water. So they say thank you, and they didn't conquer Okinawa. So the Okinawa is like, or if giving some profits or something, they know they are human, not always like that. So to have a good relationship is very important, I think, and also the trust, our confidence. So even China, we can have some connection in Okinawa. So Okinawa has I think it's a good, make a new relationship around Southeast Asian countries. Okay.
I can't tell if, does Mr. Iju, did you have anything to say? No? I mean, this question, even though it was addressed to Takara-san and Yara-san, is kind of the essential question of this meeting. So I would like to hear from Mr. Kotani and Colonel Nushin and General Gregson. I guess it's the second part of the question. At what point does security concerns of other countries override the rights of Okinawans? I think that's an important question. So, a challenging question.
Last year, for the first time since 1995, China took the territory of the foreign country. In April, China suddenly sent fishing boats to Scarborough Shoal, which is a rock located in a Philippine exclusive economic zone. And the Philippine Coast Guard tried to protect this rock. But after 2 months confrontation, the Philippines, because of their lack of capabilities and capacity, needed to withdraw from the area. So today, at this moment, China is controlling this island, controlling the rock. So obviously, China is a revisionist country. If there's a window of opportunity open, China will seize the opportunity. So, unfortunately, the East Asia is now represented by the rise of China, and many regional countries, including Japan, US, and the Philippines, Vietnam, we are facing the rise of China and considering how we should respond to the challenges posed by China. So, of course, the Okinawa-based problem is basically a local problem between Tokyo government and the government in Okinawa, but still we need to think about the Okinawa-based issue in a larger strategic environment in Asia.
Or do you want to go in rank order?
Okay, I'll just make a few comments. At what point do the security concerns of other countries override the rights of Okinawans? One notes that I think local affairs always take place within the larger context of a nation's national security, and that's every every country. One does note that the effort to resolve the concerns on Okinawa are all done within the rule of law. And an effort is being made to apply and to follow legal requirements in resolutions of all issues on the base. So it's whether or not rights, I don't think it's actually accurate to say rights are being run roughshod over. If you want to see rights run roughshod over, look at how the central government sometimes deals with the environmental movement. That's another question. But on Okinawa, you say the rule of law is being followed. And even going back to, say, the Sako Agreement in around 1996, 96, that this was an effort by both governments to address the concerns of people on Okinawa. And so there always has been a concern for the people on Okinawa, for their interests, and concern may not be as everyone likes it or agrees with, but nonetheless there has been an effort made to follow both rule of law and to give some consideration to what local people want. And one could come up with very similar examples in the United States, particularly in the way that you have some local basing issues and the way they get dealt with within the larger context of U.S. national security.
We're doing the questions through the system here, Pete. So, go ahead.
The question was phrased in a very interesting way. I'm assuming that what the real meaning of the question is, when do the security needs of the United States as the other country override the rights of the Okinawans? I would say never. Look, I tried to indicate in my opening remarks the situation that we face. China is a rising power attempting to integrate into a world of established powers. Past history shows that this very often results in conflict rather than peaceful integration. Nobody wants to have a conflict with China. Everybody wants to have a peaceful environment. The question then arises as how to do it. The United States as a sovereign nation deals with Japan as a sovereign nation. I also mentioned in my remarks that the presence of foreign forces in another country involves a compromise of sovereignty on the part of both nations concerned. I don't care how detailed you write the status of forces agreement, and we have a very detailed status of forces agreement. Just as soon as you think you've thought of everything, something will happen involving the forces that results in government-to-government negotiation about how to compromise the rights of our service members under our law and the rights of Japan and the rights of Japanese citizens under Japanese law. This is not easy. We started off this discussion talking about how do we better educate our different populations on the purposes of the alliance and how the alliance operates, and I think this is an ongoing effort that we need to do, and especially with the unique and complex situation we face in Asia now. It's not the Cold War anymore, which is relatively simple conceptually. We need to have a more in-depth discussion with our own populations about the situation. Colonel Newsham mentioned that we need to do a better job of treating the electorate as intelligent, considerable, thinking individuals, and we need to do better than that, all of our politicians, rather than passing out simplistic answers. We talked before about, one of the questions before asked about concern about the rising military power of China. That quickly segued into a discussion of the Senkakus, but there's another point to the rising military power of China. Japan has budgetary challenges, the United States has budgetary challenges, and one of the things we need to do better is to better integrate our forces when we're operating together than we do now. The only acceptable answer, if we can't match China's rise in military power, is to do better with the forces that we already have at our disposal. The point that Kotani-san brought out about the Chinese establishing de facto owner of Scarborough Shoals applies directly to the problem facing Japan. Japan is 62nd in the world in land area, but you, Japan, are 6th in exclusive economic zone area. And exclusive economic zones establish fishing rights, they establish seabed mineral rights, they establish exploration rights, and many other things that are very important. When the media expresses the Senkakus or Scarborough Shoals, describes these Senkakus or the Scarborough Shoals as a meaningless pile of rocks, the media could not be more wrong. These islands, these rocks, establish exclusive economic zone limits, which are increasingly important, especially to island nations. So the Senkakus is today's challenge. Hopefully cooler heads will prevail and we will find our way out of this eyeball to eyeball standoff with China, but I would predict that we cannot assume, even if we're successful with the Senkakus, that will be the last such challenge. And these are the types of conversations we need to have between our two populations to explain what we're doing.
Thank you. This next question is to anyone. It's a legal question, so maybe Professor Takada would be the one that wanted to start the answering. If Japan is expecting to enhance its self-defense abilities, Japan needs to change its constitution, Article 9. Which is more important, changing the Article 9 or enhancing defense power? I'm not quite sure that that question makes sense, but I think the point is, which is more important, maybe changing Article 9 to enhance defense power or not change Article 9, I think was the intention of that. I don't have a table number for this question, so.
Okay, it's clear, not change.
Not change Article 9?
Because we also have already, in the legal level, the national statute have the self-defense force law. So we have the self-defense force now, but what do you do when change the, after changing the Article 9? It's more bigger or like that? So even though now Article 9 is saving something to Japanese self-defense force or other things. And also, when the constitution is adopted, almost 70% of the people said we need Article 9. But it's different, the Allied forces at that time, the United Nations, they asked Japan, you should not have any forces, something like Article 9, and we will take you out your, how to say, digger or something from you. But Japanese people say, we don't need or we don't have that. So you should not have and we don't have is quite different. Okay, so there's another way to solve issues like that. Always thinking some one way resolving is not good. So maybe it's a balance. I don't deny the military power, but it's too if it's excessive. So maybe it's better not to change the Article 9.
Does anyone else on the panel want to address that question? Kotani?
Personally, I don't think the revision of Article 9 is necessary for Japan to play a greater role. But at the same time, I think it's ideal if we can change the constitution. Some people say Prime Minister Abe is trying to our pacifist constitution into a more dangerous one. But I think it's wrong. Even if Prime Minister Abe changes Article 9, our constitution will continue to be peaceful. Because what he tries to do is just change the second part of Article 9. The first part will remain. We will not solve the international disputes by force. We will seek peaceful solution of all the disputes. This will remain even after the constitutional revision. And the reason Prime Minister Abe and others are calling for the revision of the constitution is to clarify our rights to self-defense. I think Japanese elementary school students cannot understand when they read the Constitution, Article 9, whether we have a right to the self-defense. So I think the Constitution should be simple and understandable to everyone. So if we can change, if we can clarify our rights to self-defense in a Constitution, I think it's more desirable so that we can play a greater international security cooperation role.
Does anyone else wish to address that question? We'll take that as a no. We have time for one more because I was reminded that we also want to leave some time for the panelists to ask each other questions. So I'm going to read one more question from the audience, and then surprisingly time is up. So I'm kind of looking at them saying, which one of these three do I want to ask? Maybe I should take a quick vote. Okay. One of the questions is about media coverage in Okinawa, is media coverage in Okinawa about the U.S. military too negative? How about Okinawan people who support the U.S. presence? That's one question. One question is, would moving troops from Okinawa to Hawaii lead to more problems? Is it practical from a strategic point of view? And the other question is, if the military bases close, what will happen to Okinawa's economy? Thrive, question mark, suffer, question mark, stay the same? What conditions are necessary for success? 1, 2, or 3? 3? You like that last one? Okay, we'll go with 3 just because the 3 said it loudest to me. So let me repeat that question. If the military bases close, what will happen to Okinawa's economy? Will it thrive? Will it suffer? Will it stay the same? What conditions are necessary for success? And I'm hoping that everyone will have a crack at this question. Colonel Newsham, we know his thoughts on that. But Yara-san, do you want to go first?
I think there's a common mistaken notion that we are all depend on a military income in Okinawa. Most of the Japanese think that Okinawa is the lowest income prefecture, but it is not true. We're 64th capital in income per capita, and surprisingly, we haven't been number one receiver of national government subsidies. We've been always 6th or 8th in the rank. And also, there's such a statistics proves that civilian use of the land is much more economical, profitable. 1 square kilometer of land in Okinawa create $16 million in a year. And when 1 square kilometer of military base create $9 million in a year. So we are losing 1.6 billion each year by surrendering our land for the military use. So and also labor's issues. There are 9,000 workforce provided to U.S. military base in Okinawa, but we have 630 labor forces in Okinawa. So it's going to be difficult to close U.S. military tomorrow, but maybe for maybe taking some years to go. I mean, create concrete planning to reduce the basis. Just for instance, it's going to be possible. Just for instance, Futenma taken up 480 hectare of the land which located in the middle of the town. The number of workers working in the Futenma are only 200. And there's a 200 people are retiring every day. Sorry, yeah. So with concrete and concrete planning, we can overcome the bad impact. I mean, severe impact from losing bases. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. It's my job. Mr. Iju. Yes. Thank you.
先ほどプレゼンで十分に説明ができなかったんですが、皆さんのお手元にこのパンフレットを配布をさせていただいています。そこのページ5 and ページ6。ページ5では、県の経済の全体に占める、軍関係の収入、それが、復帰時、リバージョンの時には 15.5% あったのが、現在では 5.3% に減少しています。
Okay, so Mr. Iju is referring to the pamphlet that was distributed before the panel discussions. He's asking you to go to page 5, where it says direct economic effects per year. Level of revenue related to the U.S. forces. And in 1972, it was 15.5. And in 2008, it is at 5.3 percentage ですか。はい。
で、一方、ツーリズムは、1972で、6.5 and 2008 10.9 という形になっています。で、それ以外にも、様々な産業が今育ちつつあるという形になっています。沖縄のポテンシャルを生かすと、十分な生産活動ができるという、証だろうと思っています。
Mr. Iju is saying is that based on statistics and just based on the data that they have gathered since 1972, since the reversion, there is more than enough evidence that by reverting land back to Okinawa and having even a portion of the military relocation, that the potential for growth is clearly evident and has been shown.
矢田さんも言ってましたが、鳩利用が成功して、飛躍的に税収や、所得税、税収とかですね、売上高、そういったものが、伸びている事例が、その下の方のグラフで、表されています。で、この、エリアというのは、プレゼンの時にも話をしました、沖縄本島の中南部、人口が100万余りあって、そういう地域に、存在する、基地が多いので、その部分は、日米の合意の中でも返してもらうと、返還するということになっているので、今後その返還を加速させていく必要があると考えています。
On the lower part of page 5, there are also graphic and numerical specific data and research that shows there are direct economic effects per year, and the gains that have been realized since the reversion, and a few of the bases have been returned to Okinawa. On the next page, on page 6, it shows future and further development because the majority of the bases from the middle to the northern sections and the percentage that they are occupied shows a greater potential for development and the increase of manufacturing production in Okinawa.
Thank you. Anyone else? There's-
I mentioned in my prepared remarks about geography is destiny for Okinawa, and geography is also history. Look where Okinawa sits on the eastern side and the southeastern side of the East China Sea. Look at history in this body of water. Look at current events in this body of water and current ambitions of other countries in the region, and ask yourself, if all the Americans left the bases in Okinawa tomorrow, would they remain empty or would somebody else occupy them?
Colonel?
Just a couple comments on the economic effects that I think one would always do well to always ask. Does a young person on Okinawa who grows up and goes to school, goes to college, what sort of prospects does he have as things stand today? And then ask yourself, if you took away the bases and then all the subsidies which come with them, and ask if that would give him more opportunities, maybe not, or at least not for a good long while. That's a bit of a concern. And just as, once again, looking at some of the figures are actually very interesting to give some sense of the base-related subsidies have, that if you just took this extra several $billion which the Okinawa received last year and did some math, that it works out to about every single day somebody has to come up with a $3 million project to do that makes sense. And that is very hard to do. If you were to do that on the island of Oahu, you would have 365 $3 million projects all over the place. So it would be a huge, huge effect, I think. Is it something that could be overcome? Theoretically, possibly someday, and certainly if the Singapore model was applied. But as General Gregson said, if you were to remove American bases, it's very unlikely that they would stay completely empty for very long.
I also show the instance of one instance because the Ishigaki Island, there's no military bases there, but they are doing an economy. Many tourists coming from mainland or other places, especially from Taiwan, because the Ishigaki is history. Their custom, something like or events or festival, they in the summertime they celebrate the Taiwanese, background. So many tourists come. So I don't think all the bases removed from Okinawa, but it's too congested. So even some of the 1/3 or half is gone. Maybe it's not any effect to Okinawa because the economy quite different. Okinawa's economy, and when some construction have started, construction company from mainland, they come to Okinawa and take money to back. So that's not good for Okinawa economy. So even something construction in the military, even in a bus driver, a bus company, school bus to inside the military. Once it was an Okinawan driver and an Okinawan bus company, but now the company from mainland and they came to Okinawa and they took the contract. So the economy quite different in Okinawa. So if the small money is get to Okinawa really, and it's got back to mainland. Okay.